She called it fairness, but as she casually explained why my entire college fund was now in my sister's bank account, I realized I was paying for choices I never made. My mother always liked to say she was fair. She said it the way religious people say amen, or politicians say for the people. Like the simple act of repeating the word made it a tangible truth. If there was one slice of pie left, she'd cut it in half with surgical precision. If she bought my sister a sweater, she bought me a book of equal value. It was a performance of equity that I had watched for 22 years. So, when she called me on a stifling Tuesday afternoon and said, "We need to talk about your college fund," I didn't panic. There was no tremor in her voice, no ominous pause that suggested disaster. Just that flat, practiced tone of a woman who believes she is the moral center of the universe. I was living in a tiny, sun-baked apartment in Tempe, Arizona, scraping by on tips from a coffee shop while finishing my last semester at ASU. The fund was something she had mentioned my entire life, dangling it like a golden carrot. Your future, she called it. It was the safety net that allowed me to sleep at night when my bank account hovered in the double digits. It was the promise that, eventually, all the double shifts and the instant noodles would be worth it because I wouldn't drown in debt the moment I grabbed my diploma. I drove to her house in Mesa, the one I grew up in. The air conditioning in my old sedan was broken, blowing hot, dusty air into my face, but I didn't mind. I was thinking about the tuition deadline coming up in 3 weeks. I figured she wanted to go over the transfer details, or maybe have me sign some release forms. I parked in the driveway, noting that my sister Rachel's minivan was taking up 2 spots. That should have been my first warning. Inside, the house was a shrine to beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige curtains. The only splash of color came from the plastic chaos of my sister's life scattered across the floor: bright red fire trucks, yellow blocks, a decapitated doll. Rachel was sitting on the sofa, her feet tucked under her, scrolling on her phone while rocking a carrier with her foot. Her youngest was asleep inside. She didn't look up when I walked in. She just kept scrolling, her thumb moving in a hypnotic rhythm. Mom was sitting in the armchair, her hands folded in her lap. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, a sound that had haunted my childhood. Tick, tock, tick, tock. It felt like a courtroom. "Sit down, Jessica," Mom said. I sat on the edge of the sofa, as far from Rachel as I could manage without being rude. "Is everything okay? You sounded serious on the phone." Mom didn't waste time. She didn't offer me water. She didn't ask about my classes or my job. She just looked at me with those steady, unblinking eyes. "I gave the money to Rachel," she said. The words didn't land immediately. It was like hearing a sentence in a language you haven't spoken in years. My brain had to translate the sounds into meaning. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that bounced off the beige walls. It was a reflex, a desperate attempt by my brain to reject a reality it didn't want to accept. "You mean you loaned it to her?" I said, my voice sounding thin in the quiet room. "Because tuition is due in 3 weeks, Mom. I have the invoice on my laptop." "No," Mom replied, her voice steady, devoid of guilt. "I transferred it. Yesterday. It's done." My stomach dropped, a physical sensation of freefall. I looked at Rachel. She still hadn't looked up. She was aggressively ignoring the conversation, shielding herself with the glow of her smartphone screen. "Why?" I whispered. The word felt heavy, like it was made of lead. "She needs it more," Mom said, gesturing vaguely toward the baby carrier and the messy floor. "She has kids, Jessica. 3 of them. They need a bigger house. They need stability. College can wait. Babies can't." I stared at her. The logic was so twisted, so profoundly unfair, that I couldn't find the counterargument. "But it's my college fund. You told me, since I was 8 years old, that this money was for school. I worked double shifts. I didn't take loans because you told me not to. You told me the money was there. And it was," Mom said, uncrossing her legs. "But circumstances change. You're independent, Jessica. You always have been. You'll figure it out. Rachel isn't like you. She needs help." There was that word again. Independent. It was her favorite compliment when I was 10 and making my own lunch. It was her favorite excuse when she missed my soccer games to babysit Rachel's kids. It was a weapon she used to absolve herself of responsibility. If I was independent, I didn't need her. If I didn't need her, she could give everything to Rachel. I'm independent because I had to be, I said, my voice rising. I didn't ask for this. You're stealing my future to pay for her choices. Rachel finally looked up. Her eyes were tired, but there was a hardness in them I hadn't seen before. A defensive glint. Don't be selfish, Jess. You don't know what it's like. You're just a student. You have no real responsibilities. Selfish. I stood up, my hands shaking. I'm selfish because I want the money that was promised to me. The money I planned my entire life around. Lower your voice, Mom snapped, pointing at the sleeping baby. We are not going to have a scene. I made a decision as a mother. I prioritized the most vulnerable members of this family. If you can't see that, then that's a failing of your character, not mine. I looked between them. The united front. The martyr mother and the golden child sister. They had rewritten the narrative before I even walked through the door. I was the villain for wanting what was mine. I was the intruder in their struggle. How much? I asked. How much did you give her? Mom hesitated, just for a second. Then she told me the number. Every dollar. Every single cent of the $50,000 that was supposed to launch my life. Gone. Vaporized into Rachel's mortgage or credit card debt, or whatever hole she had dug herself into this time. I didn't scream. I wanted to. I wanted to pick up the ticking clock and smash it against the beige wall. But I knew that would only prove them right. It would make me the dramatic one, the unstable one. So I went quiet. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable, until Mom shifted in her chair and Rachel looked back down at her phone. You're independent, Mom said again, softer this time, as if the repetition would fix the hole she'd just blown in my life. You'll figure it out. I turned around and walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't slam the door. I just left them in their beige box with their twisted version of fairness. But as I walked to my car, the heat of the Arizona sun hitting my face, I felt something cold settling in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It was the beginning of something much harder. Do you have any idea how it feels to be punished for being strong? To have your own mother look you in the eye and tell you that because you work hard you deserve less? It is a betrayal that cuts deeper than any knife. If this story makes your blood boil, if you've ever been the one left behind because you were strong enough to handle it, I need you to smash that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how I turn this pain into power. And I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and tell me, has your family ever betrayed you like this? Let's talk about it. The drive back to Tempe was a blur of heat distortion and red brake lights. I didn't turn on the radio. I couldn't handle the noise. My mind was too busy replaying the conversation in a loop, dissecting every word Mom had said, searching for a loophole that didn't exist. By the time I unlocked the door to my apartment, the sun had set, but the air inside was still heavy and stale. I sat at my wobbly IKEA desk and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the trackpad before I logged into my student portal. The screen refreshed, and there it was, the reality of my situation staring back at me in bold, unfeeling font. Tuition due, $8,400. Deadline, 21 days. I switched tabs. Checking account, $412.38. I did the math 3 times, hoping I had carried a 1 somewhere, hoping for a miracle. But the numbers didn't change. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Utilities were due in 10 days. And the tuition, that was a mountain I couldn't climb on barista tips. I could have cried. I probably should have cried. But Mom's voice kept echoing in my head. You're independent. You'll figure it out. It was a challenge, a dismissal, and a curse all wrapped into one. If I cried, I was proving that I wasn't the strong one. If I collapsed, she was right to give the money to Rachel, because clearly I couldn't handle the pressure. I closed the student portal and opened a blank document. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long minute. Then, I typed a single word in the center of the page, evidence. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet. I wasn't thinking about lawsuits or revenge, not really. I just needed to make sense of the chaos. Writing it down made it real. It made me feel less invisible. I started listing facts, stripping away the emotion until only the cold, hard truth remained. Promised college funds since age 8. No written agreement, but repeated verbal confirmation. Fund transferred to Rachel without my consent or knowledge. Reason provided. She has kids. I didn't stop there. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back years back. I found texts from Mom when I was a freshman. Don't worry about those student loans, honey. We've got you covered. Focus on your grades. Screenshot. I found an email from my sophomore year where I asked about applying for financial aid, and she had replied, "Don't bother with the FAFSA paperwork. It's a headache, and we have a savings. You're fine." Screenshot. I pasted them all into the document. It was a timeline of lies. Actions have consequences. She used to tell me when I was a teenager and missed curfew by 10 minutes. Now, looking at the document, I realized she had never believed that applied to her. For 2 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation. I went to work. I poured lattes. I smiled at customers. I came home and ate peanut butter on toast because I was afraid to spend money on groceries. I didn't call Mom. She didn't call me. Then, on Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was Rachel. My thumb hovered over the decline button. I didn't want to hear her justifications. I didn't want to hear about how the money was going to fix her life while ruining mine. But then curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. I slid the bar to answer. "Hello, Jess." Rachel's voice was wet, thick with tears. She was crying, that loud, gasping sob she used when she wanted to be comforted. "Oh God, Jess. What is it, Rachel?" I asked, my voice flat. "Did the check bounce?" "No," she choked out. "She didn't tell you?" "Mom told me you agreed. She said you gave me the money." My hand tightened around the phone, so hard I thought the screen might crack. "What?" "She said you told her you didn't really need it," Rachel stammered, dropping a bomb that shattered the entire narrative I thought I knew. "She told me you were thinking of dropping out anyway." "Dropping out?" I repeated the words, testing the weight of them on my tongue. They tasted like ash. "Yeah," Rachel sniffed, her voice wobbling. "She said you were burnt out, that you wanted to take a gap year to find yourself, or something. She made it sound like I was doing you a favor by taking the money off your hands so you wouldn't feel guilty about quitting." I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't scream. I simply pressed the red button, because if I listened to another second of my mother's fabricated reality, I would have put my fist through the drywall. This changed everything. Before this moment, I thought I was dealing with unfairness. I thought I was dealing with a mother who simply loved one child more than the other, a painful, but common, human flaw. But this was calculation. This was a preemptive strike. She hadn't just stolen my money, she had stolen my reputation. She had painted me as a flake, a quitter, to justify her own theft. She needed a villain to make herself the hero of her own story, and she chose me. I turned back to my laptop. The evidence document was still open. I didn't feel the urge to cry anymore. The sadness had evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I typed a new bullet point. False statements made on my behalf regarding academic standing. Defamation of character to justify asset transfer. I didn't confront Mom. Not yet. I knew if I called her now, she'd gaslight me. She'd say I was remembering it wrong, or that she misspoke, or that I was being hysterical. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. Instead, I went dark. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost. I went to the financial aid office and sat in a plastic chair for 3 hours until a counselor agreed to see me. I took out emergency loans with interest rates that made my stomach turn. I picked up the closing shift at the coffee shop, then the opening shift the next morning. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate instant ramen and stale pastries from work. My phone became a repository of guilt trips. "We miss you," Mom texted on day 4. "Are you still pouting?" On day 7. "You're being dramatic." Family sacrifices for each other on day 10. I saved every single one. Screenshot. Upload. Save. I was building a fortress of proof, brick by digital brick. I was exhausted, my eyes were constantly gritty, and I had lost 5 pounds I didn't have to lose. But I was still standing. I was proving her lie wrong, every single day I didn't drop out. Then came the twist I never saw coming. It was late on a Tuesday, exactly 2 weeks after the bomb had dropped. I was studying for a finals exam, my brain foggy with fatigue, when my phone buzzed on the desk. I expected another guilt trip text from Mom, or a confused message from Rachel. But the caller ID said Grandma, Fresno. My mother's mother. We weren't incredibly close. She lived in California and was a woman of few words, but she had always been sharp. I answered, expecting a generic check-in. Jessica, she said. Her voice was crisp, cutting through the static. You sound tired. I am Grandma. Just studying. I heard about Rachel's new house repairs, she said, her tone unreadable. And I heard you're taking out loans. There was a pause. A heavy, pregnant silence that felt like the air before a thunderstorm. So, she whispered, the steel in her voice chilling me to the bone. Your mother finally did it. She touched the account. I sat up straight. What account? The one your grandfather set up, she replied calmly. The one with the conditions she thinks I forgot about. Conditions? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Grandma, Mom told me that money was just savings she put aside. She said she had the right to move it. Your mother says a lot of things to make herself feel better, Grandma replied, her voice dry as desert sand. Your grandfather set that account up before he passed. He knew how your mother was with money, how she tends to pour water into the bucket with the biggest hole. He wanted to make sure his grandchildren had a fair start. She explained it clearly. The fund wasn't a casual savings account. It was a custodial account, a specific educational trust established under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. My grandfather had been the custodian, and when he died, Mom took over. But the legal designation of the money hadn't changed. It belongs to the beneficiary, Jessica, Grandma said. Not the custodian. She can manage it, but she can't spend it on herself, and she certainly can't give it to someone else unless it's for your benefit. She gave it to Rachel for a mortgage, I whispered. Then she broke the law, Grandma said simply. I have the original copies of the set-up paperwork in my filing cabinet. Do you want them? Please, I said. Send everything. The email arrived the next morning while I was getting ready for work. I opened the attachment, my heart hammering against my ribs. There it was, in black and white, scanned into a PDF. The Edwards Family Educational Trust. My name was listed as the sole beneficiary. And there, at the bottom, was my mother's signature acknowledging her duties as the successor custodian. She hadn't just been unfair. She had committed theft. I printed every page. The sound of the printer rhythmically spitting out the sheets was the only noise in my apartment. Zip, zip, slide. Zip, zip, slide. I punched holes in the paper and slid them into the folder labeled evidence. It wasn't just a folder anymore. It was a weapon. 2 days later, the summons came. Mom called me. She didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded weary, playing the role of the exhausted peacemaker. Come for dinner, Jessica, she said. We need to clear the air. Rachel is here. We're all just sad. We want to move past this. Okay, I said. I'll be there. I didn't tell her I was bringing a lawyer, or rather, the ghost of one. I put on my best jeans and a clean shirt. I grabbed my bag. I checked the folder one last time. When I pulled into the driveway in Mesa, the house looked the same as it always did. The beige stucco, the manicured lawn, the minivan leaking oil on the concrete. But it looked different to me now. It didn't look like home. It looked like a crime scene. I walked through the front door. The smell of pot roast filled the air. Mom's apology dinner special. Rachel was at the kitchen table, feeding the baby. Mom was at the counter, slicing bread. They both looked up when I entered. Mom smiled, a tight, hopeful expression that didn't reach her eyes. I'm glad you came, Mom said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You need to let this go, Jessica. Holding on to resentment will ruin you. We're family. I didn't say a word. I walked over to the table, the laminate surface sticky with spilled juice. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. It landed on the table with a heavy thud that silenced the room. Mom looked at the folder. Then she looked at me. Her smile faltered. What is this? She asked. I opened the cover, revealing the first document. It wasn't the trust paperwork. It was something else I had found in the file Grandma sent, something that proved Mom knew exactly what she was doing the day she drained the account. Read the date on the first page, I said softly. Mom leaned in, squinting. And as she read, the color drained out of her face so fast I thought she might faint. Read the date, I repeated, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Mom's eyes scanned the top of the document. It was a photocopy of a custodian fiduciary acknowledgement form. It was dated 5 years ago, shortly after Grandpa passed away, when Mom had officially taken control of the account. October 14th, Mom whispered. And read the bold paragraph right above your signature, I said. She didn't want to. I could see her throat work as she swallowed dryly. But she read it aloud, her voice barely a murmur. I, the custodian, acknowledge that these funds are irrevocable and are to be used solely for the educational or medical benefit of the beneficiary, Jessica Edwards. Any withdrawal for personal use or transfer to third parties constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty and theft. The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking clock in the hallway seemed to get louder, hammering the point home. Theft! 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 You knew, I said. You didn't just decide to help Rachel. You knew it was illegal, and you did it anyway because you thought I wouldn't check. You thought I was too busy working double shifts to look at the paperwork. Rachel shifted in her chair. She looked from the paper to Mom, confusion knitting her brow. Wait, she said. Mom, what does that mean? What conditions? Mom stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. She crumpled the paper in her hand. This is unnecessary, Jessica. It's just legal jargon. It's family money. Grandpa would have wanted Rachel to have a house for the babies. He wouldn't care about some technicality. He set it up so you couldn't do exactly this. I countered. He knew you. I am your mother, she snapped, her face flushing red. I made an executive decision. You need to let this go. Holding on to this resentment will ruin you. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. She wasn't sorry she took the money. She was sorry she got caught. And she was terrified because she realized the independent daughter she had created was now independent of her manipulation. I reached out and took the folder back. I didn't snatch it. I just calmly slid it out from under her hand. I'm letting go, I said. Mom blinked, hope flickering in her eyes. Good. I knew you'd be reasonable. No, I corrected her. I'm leaving. Leaving where? Out of this dynamic, I replied, backing away toward the door. Out of decisions where I don't exist. You told me to figure it out. I am. I'm figuring out that I don't need to be the victim in your story anymore. You walk out that door, Jessica, and you're on your own. Mom threatened, resorting to the only leverage she thought she had. Don't expect us to help you when you fail. I don't expect anything from you, I said. That's the difference between me and Rachel. I turned and walked out. I didn't look back at Rachel. I didn't look back at the beige walls. I walked into the night air, the heat of the day radiating off the pavement. I got into my car, my hands shaking only after I closed the door. I started the engine and reversed out of the driveway. As I shifted into drive, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I thought it would be Mom screaming via text. It wasn't. It was an automated email from the university. I glanced at the preview on the lock screen, and my heart stopped. Urgent. Tuition payment processed. I slammed on the brakes. I hadn't paid it. I didn't have the money. I unlocked my phone and opened the email. The payment had been made in full 5 minutes ago. I scrolled down to see the source of the funds, and the name on the receipt wasn't mine. And it certainly wasn't my mother's. I stared at the glowing screen of my phone, the blue light harsh in the darkness of my car. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I blinked, sure I was hallucinating from stress and caffeine withdrawal, but the name on the digital receipt didn't change. Payment source, Martha Edwards. Grandma. I let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. My hands shook as I dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring, as if she had been waiting by the phone. Did you get the email? She asked, her voice calm and unwavering. Grandma. I choked out, tears finally spilling over, hot and fast. You paid it? How? That's over $8,000. You're on a fixed income. You shouldn't have. Hush! She cut me off gently. I had some bonds your grandfather left me. Rainy day money. I'd say a hurricane hitting my granddaughter counts as a rainy day. I'll pay you back, I promised, clutching the phone like a lifeline. Every cent. I swear. I know you will, Jessica. You're the only one in that house with a moral compass, she said, and I could hear the steel returning to her tone. But this isn't just about the tuition. I spoke to my lawyer right after I sent the money. I wiped my eyes, confusion dampening my relief. Your lawyer? Why? Because your mother seems to have forgotten how the world works, Grandma said. She thinks she can rob Peter to pay Paul, but she forgot that Peter is the one who holds the keys. There was a shifting sound on the line, like she was settling into her favorite armchair. I didn't just pay your tuition, Jessica. I also made a phone call to the bank regarding the unauthorized transfer of the trust. Since I am the original grantor of those funds, I have influence. Mom said the money is already gone, I said, feeling the dread creep back in. She put it into Rachel's house. Oh, I know, Grandma replied. And that's going to be a very expensive mistake for her. But that's not why I need you to listen closely right now. I went still. What is it? You told her you were leaving, didn't you? Yes. I can't stay there, Grandma. I can't look at her. Good, Grandma said. You need to get out. Pack your things tonight. Move to Flagstaff. Move to Timbuktu, I don't care. Just get out of that house. I am, I said. I'm going back to pack right now. Wait until she goes to sleep, Grandma advised. And Jessica, when you walk out that door, I need you to leave something on the kitchen counter for me. It's a letter I just emailed to you. Print it out and leave it right next to her coffee pot. What does the letter say? I asked, my curiosity piquing. Grandma's voice dropped an octave, turning ice cold. It's an eviction notice, she whispered. Your mother forgot that the house she lives in, the house she raised you in, was never put in her name. It's still in the trust. And as of this morning, I'm dissolving her right to live there. My jaw dropped. You're kicking her out. No, Grandma corrected me, and I could practically hear the grim smile on her face. I'm not kicking her out, but I am selling the house, and I think you'll be very interested to know who the new owner is going to be. I found a 24-hour print shop near the university campus. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing buzz as I watched the pages slide into the tray. It was a formal legal notice, drafted by a lawyer who clearly didn't bill by the hour, concise, brutal, and devoid of emotion. Notice of intent to sell real property. Notice to vacate. I held the warm paper in my hands. It felt lighter than the evidence folder, but it carried 10 times the weight. I got back into my car and drove toward Mesa. The roads were empty, the city asleep under a blanket of dry heat. It was 2 a.m. when I pulled up a block away from my childhood home. I cut the headlights and coasted to a stop, not wanting to wake the neighbors, or worse, alert Mom. The house was dark. A single amber streetlight cast long, distorted shadows across the lawn that Rachel's kids had trampled into dirt. I walked up the driveway, my sneakers silent on the concrete. My key still worked. I had half expected her to change the locks, but Mom's arrogance was her blind spot. She never truly believed I would leave, so she never thought she needed to keep me out. I slipped inside. The air conditioning was off to save money, and the house smelled of stagnant heat and that lingering pot roast from earlier. The ticking clock in the hallway was the only sound. Tick, tock. It felt like a countdown. I crept into the kitchen. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into stripes of silver and black. I placed Grandma's letter right next to the coffee pot, propping it up against the sugar jar. It was the first thing Mom would see when she stumbled in here for her morning caffeine fix. I looked down at the document one last time, my eyes drawn to the section Grandma had mentioned. Buyer, the Edwards Family Educational Trust. Sole beneficiary, Jessica Edwards. I had to cover my mouth to stop a gasp. Grandma hadn't just sold the house to a stranger. She had sold it to the trust, my trust. She had liquidated her own bonds to buy the house from herself, effectively transferring the asset to me to replace the cash Mom had stolen. Mom was living in my house, and she was about to find out that her landlord was the daughter she had robbed. I turned to leave, a sense of grim satisfaction settling in my chest. But as I passed the kitchen island, my hip bumped against a stack of mail Mom had shoved into a decorative basket, the junk pile she always ignored until it spilled over. A letter slid off the top and hit the floor. I bent down to pick it up, intending to just put it back. But the moonlight caught the name on the envelope, Jessica Edwards. It was addressed to me, here at this house. But the return address wasn't the university, and it wasn't a doctor's office. It was a credit card company I had never banked with. The envelope had been slit open and carefully taped back shut. My blood ran cold. I ripped the tape, pulling out the folded statement inside. My eyes scanned the lines, struggling to make sense of the numbers in the dim light. It wasn't an offer for a new card. It was a statement for an existing one. Current balance, $14,205. Minimum payment due immediate. I flipped the page. The transaction history went back 3 years. Grocery stores, gas stations, a trip to Disneyland that Rachel had taken the kids on last summer, the one Mom claimed she had helped out with. I wasn't just looking at a stolen college fund anymore. I was holding proof that my mother hadn't just taken my future money, she had been actively spending my credit score since I was 19. I reached for the rest of the mail in the basket, my hands shaking violently. I grabbed a handful of envelopes, bank statements, loan offers, collection notices. Then, the kitchen light flicked on. I wondered how long it would take you to find those, Mom said. I spun around. She was standing in the doorway in her bathrobe, her arms crossed, looking not at me, but at the letters in my hand. And she wasn't looking guilty. She was holding a phone to her ear. "She's here," Mom said into the receiver, her eyes locking onto mine with a chilling calmness. "Send the police. She just broke in." The wail of sirens cut through the night air before I could even process what she had done. Mom stood there, tightening the belt of her bathrobe, a look of smug satisfaction plastered across her face. She wasn't afraid of the police. She saw them as her personal security force, a tool to put unruly children back in their place. "You really called the cops?" I asked, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt cold. "I'm holding proof that you committed federal identity theft, and you call the police on me?" "I called them on an intruder," she said smoothly. "You don't live here, Jessica. You stormed in at 2 a.m. You're rifling through my private documents. That's burglary. These are in my name," I shouted, waving the credit card statements. "You spent $14,000 in my name." "I was building your credit score," she snapped, the lie slipping out with practiced ease. "You should be thanking me. But instead, you're here threatening your mother." Blue and red lights flashed against the kitchen window, dancing across the beige walls. Heavy footsteps pounded up the driveway. The front door, which I had left unlocked, swung open. 2 officers walked in, hands resting near their holsters, scanning the room. "Hands where we can see them," the taller officer commanded. I raised my hands, the envelopes still clutched in my right fist. Mom immediately burst into tears. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. She slumped against the counter, clutching her chest. "Oh, thank God you're here," she sobbed. "My daughter, she's unstable. She broke in. She's stealing my mail." "I'm terrified." The officer looked at me. I was wearing a hoodie and jeans, looking exhausted and frantic. Mom looked like a victim in her pajamas. "Ma'am, step away from the counter," the officer told me. "Drop the papers." "Officer, please, you have to listen," I said, keeping my hands up but refusing to drop the evidence. "She called you to cover up a crime. These are credit card statements in my name that she opened without my permission." "We can sort that out later," the officer said, stepping closer. "Right now, the homeowner wants you removed from the premises. If you don't leave, you'll be arrested for trespassing." Mom smirked through her fake tears. "I just want her gone, officer. I don't want to press charges if she just leaves and gives me my papers back." She reached out for the envelopes. "I can't be trespassing," I said loudly, pulling my hand back. "And why is that?" the officer asked, annoyed. I nodded toward the coffee pot, where Grandma's letter still sat, untouched and unnoticed in the chaos. "Because she's not the homeowner." "I am." Mom froze. The officer looked at the letter, then back at me. "Excuse me." "Read the document on the counter," I said. "My grandmother, the trustee, just sold the house. To the Edwards Family Trust. I am the sole beneficiary. Technically, I'm her landlord, and I was here to deliver an eviction notice." The officer hesitated. He walked over to the counter and picked up the paper. He read it under the harsh kitchen light. He checked the date. He checked the names. Then he looked at Mom. "Ma'am," the officer said to her, his tone shifting entirely. "Is this accurate? Does this trust own the property?" Mom's face went pale. That's impossible. My mother wouldn't." "It's a legal deed transfer," the officer said. "If this is valid, you can't trespass the owner from their own property." Mom lunged. She didn't go for me. She went for the credit card statements in my hand. Give me those. They're mine. Whoa. The second officer stepped in, grabbing Mom's arm to restrain her. In the scuffle, the stack of papers in my hand fanned out, and the most recent statement fluttered to the floor, landing face up. The tall officer shone his flashlight on it. He squinted at the transaction list. Jessica Edwards, he read from the statement. There's a charge here from yesterday. $500. I didn't make it, I said. She did. It's for a storage unit, the officer said, looking up at me with a frown. Desert Secure Storage. Unit 404. Mom stopped struggling. She went completely limp in the other officer's grip. The color didn't just drain from her face. She looked like she had seen a ghost. Don't, she whispered. Don't go there. The officer looked at her reaction, his instincts sharpening. Why, ma'am? What's in the storage unit? Nothing, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Just old clothes. Just toys. I looked at the statement. The unit had been rented 3 years ago, the same week Grandpa died. The payments were monthly, automatic, and expensive. Officer, I said, a terrible realization forming in my gut. If that unit is in my name, I have a right to know what's inside, don't I? You sure do, the officer said, eyeing Mom suspiciously. And judging by your mother's reaction, I think we should go take a look. Mom looked at me, and for the first time, the mask dropped completely. There was no anger, no manipulation. Just pure, unadulterated terror. Jessica, she begged, her voice barely a sound. If you open that door, you destroy this family forever. The drive to the storage facility was a silent, suffocating journey. The officer allowed me to ride in the back of his cruiser, not as a suspect, but as a witness, while Mom followed in the second patrol car, detained but not yet arrested. Desert Secure Storage was a sprawling grid of corrugated metal and concrete located on the edge of town, where the streetlights thinned out into the blackness of the desert. The night manager, a groggy man in a stain-covered polo, met us at the gate. He didn't ask questions once he saw the badges. He just punched a code into the keypad and pointed us toward row 400. My heart was beating in my throat, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. You destroy this family forever, Mom had said. What could be in a storage unit that was worth more than the identity theft she had already committed? We stopped in front of Unit 404. It was a large, drive-up garage-style unit. The officer shone his flashlight on the lock. Standard padlock, he muttered. Ma'am, since this unit is in your name and you don't have the key, do I have your permission to cut it? Yes, I said, my voice barely audible. Open it. He retrieved a pair of bolt cutters from his trunk. With a grunt of effort and a sharp snap, the metal shackle gave way. The lock clattered to the concrete. The officer grabbed the handle at the bottom of the rolling door. Stand back. He shoved the door upward. The metal rumbled like thunder, revealing the darkness inside. The officer raised his flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust motes dancing in the air. I gasped. It wasn't piles of old clothes. It wasn't broken furniture. It was a museum. From floor to ceiling, the unit was packed with things I hadn't seen in 3 years. Things Mom had told me were sold to pay for Grandpa's hospice care. Grandpa's vintage coin collection, encased in heavy velvet binders. His antique Fender Stratocaster, the one he promised to teach me to play. The mahogany humidors. The silver tea service that had been in our family for 4 generations. She kept it, I whispered. She told me she sold it all. She cried about it. She said we were broke. Looks like a hoard of assets, the officer said, stepping inside carefully. Hiding valuables during probate? That's fraud on a whole other level. I walked in, my legs feeling like jelly. I ran my hand over a stack of oil paintings, Grandpa's originals. They were worth thousands each. She hadn't sold a thing. She had stolen his legacy, hoarded it in a metal box in the desert, and then stolen my future to pay for the storage fees. But in the center of the room, sitting atop a covered armchair, was a simple plastic filing box. It looked out of place among the antiques. I was drawn to it like a magnet. I lifted the lid. Inside were files, manila folders, labeled by year. I pulled out the one marked 2024. It was full of bank transfers, not just the college fund. I saw withdrawals from accounts I didn't know existed. But it was the notebook at the bottom of the box that caught my eye. It was a spiral-bound planner, Mom's handwriting scurrying across the pages. I flipped through it. It was a log, a meticulous record of every lie she had told. Told Jessica financial aid fell through. Transferred $5,000 to Rachel, house repairs. Told Mom, Grandma, that Jessica is failing classes. It was sickening. But then, a folded piece of notebook paper fell out of the back of the planner. I picked it up. It wasn't Mom's handwriting. The loops were wider, the eyes dotted with little circles. It was the handwriting I had seen on birthday cards my entire life. It was Rachel's. I started to read, and the ground seemed to vanish beneath my feet. Mom, don't worry about Jessica finding out. She's too busy working to check the accounts. Just make sure you transfer the next lump sum before her tuition is due. I need the patio done before the baby comes. If she asks, just use the independent line. She always falls for that. I lowered the letter, my breath hitching in a sob that hurt my chest. Rachel. My sister hadn't just been the passive recipient of Mom's favoritism. She wasn't the oblivious golden child I thought she was. Officer, I said, my voice turning into something hard and unrecognizable. I need you to look at this. He walked over, shining his light on the paper. What is it? Proof, I said, looking at the squad car where my mother was sitting. Proof that I don't just have one thief to evict. I looked deeper into the box, my hand brushing against a thick, sealed envelope at the very bottom. It was heavy. On the front, in Grandpa's shaky hand, it read, "To be opened only by Jessica Edwards." I tore it open. Inside was a single document, a last will and testament, dated 3 days before he died. I read the first paragraph, and my vision blurred. I looked up at the officer, the paper shaking in my hands. My mother isn't just a thief, I whispered, the horror of the truth finally hitting me. She's a fugitive. Why? The officer asked. Because, I said, holding up the will. According to this, she hasn't been my mother legally for 20 years. The officer shined his light on the document, reading the decree attached to the will. Adoption decree. Granted to Arthur Edwards. Date, August 14th, 2005. He adopted me. I realized, the memories of a chaotic childhood suddenly making sense. When I was 2, my father left, and Mom, she was gone for months. Grandpa stepped in. He didn't just take custody, he legally became my parent. He stripped her of her rights. Which means, the officer said, looking toward the squad car where Mom watched with terrified eyes, she had absolutely no legal standing to access your accounts, make decisions for you, or claim you as a dependent for the last 20 years. Hiding this document to maintain control of your finances? That's fraud on a massive scale. The police didn't wait. They walked me back to the car. I watched as they cuffed Mom. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was sobbing, pleading with the officers, blaming Rachel, blaming Grandpa, blaming everyone but herself. But when her eyes met mine through the window, she stopped. She saw the will in my hand, and she knew the game was finally, irrevocably over. The fallout was swift and brutal. Grandma flew in the next morning. We sat in a lawyer's office as the full scope of Grandpa's estate was revealed. Because I was legally his daughter, not his granddaughter, and because Mom had been disinherited in that same will, everything came to me. The storage unit full of assets, the trust fund, and yes, the house in Mesa. Rachel tried to fight. She called me 3 days after Mom's arraignment, not to apologize, but to beg. "You can't kick us out, Jess," she cried. "Mom is in jail. I have nowhere to go. I have kids. You have a husband," I said calmly. "And you have the $50,000 you stole from me. Oh, wait, the forensic accountant said you spent it on a kitchen remodel and a trip to Cabo. That's unfortunate." "You're heartless," she screamed. "No," I replied, looking at the eviction notice on my desk, signed and ready. "I'm independent, just like you all wanted me to be." I gave her 30 days. I wasn't a monster. I wouldn't put children on the street. But I sold the house to a developer the day they moved out. I couldn't keep it. The walls had absorbed too many lies. The criminal case was open and shut. Between the identity theft, the credit card fraud, and the embezzlement of a trust, Mom was looking at 5 years. Rachel accepted a plea deal for her role in the conspiracy, probation and restitution. She would be paying me back, garnished from her wages, for the next 20 years. 6 months later, I walked across the stage at ASU. The stadium was packed. The air was hot, just like it had been the day Mom stole my future, but the heat didn't bother me now. I scanned the crowd. There was no beige section. No Mom criticizing my hair. No Rachel scrolling on her phone. Instead, in the front row, wearing a bright purple hat and a smile that outshone the Arizona sun, was Grandma. She was holding a bouquet of sunflowers and cheering louder than anyone else. I accepted my diploma. I shook the dean's hand. And as I looked out at the sea of faces, I realized that for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone anything. My tuition was paid. My credit was restored. My future was entirely, beautifully mine. I had lost a mother and a sister, yes, but I had found myself, and as I walked off that stage, head held high, I knew that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. Sometimes, the family you are born into is just a starting point. The family you keep is the one that respects you. And the best revenge, it isn't screaming, it isn't fighting, it's living a life so full, so successful, and so free that they have to watch it from a distance, knowing they can never touch you again.